Bungie has just responded to all of the marathon backlash with a live stream, and it went pretty bad. It went about as bad as you think it would go. On top of it being bad, they had a bunch of audio issues, so bear with me here. We're going to watch through the whole thing together. Good luck, guys.
All right, we're live.
It's like a crazy...
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm
It's
Joe.
crazy
For those who
desync.
don't know me, I'm the game director here on Marathon. To my left here, or potentially on right on your screen, depending on if it's mirrored, is Joe Cross.
What?
Our director on Marathon. Sitting across from me, who's not on camera, is Andrew Witz, gameplay director, and we're gonna spend some time talking about some stuff today. Our show is a little bit different today. We planned actually to show a lot more stuff, but for a lot of reasons we're about to get into, we decided not to show a bunch of this stuff. But we are going to be discussing a lot about what we learned through Alpha, some of the plans that we're going forward with. But before we get into that, Joe Cross has some sort of topic that he wants to talk to you all about.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. And hey, everyone. I'm Joe Cross, franchise art director of Marathon. Yeah, and wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the events from yesterday. It came to our attention, and sorry, I wrote this. I want to make sure I get this message right. It came to our attention that an artist who worked on Marathon in the early stages of pre-production took a number of graphic elements from a graphic designer without permission or acknowledgement and placed them on a decal sheet that was then checked in 2020. The decal sheet included icons and text elements. These elements ended up in our alpha build, and there's absolutely no excuse for this oversight, and we are working on and 100% committed to our review process to ensure instances like this don't happen again on Marathon or at Bungie. A few of the things that we've done over the last 24 hours and what we're doing to shore up the review process are as follows. We've reached out to Anti-Real, the artist in question, and followed up to ensure that we do right by this artist. We're auditing all of the previous work by the artist, the internal artist, including the environment decals already in the build, which is part of why we're delaying some of the content we're going to show today. And we're committed to removing anything that is questionably or inappropriately sourced. We're doing a very broad decal audit, and if we locate any other details or elements, we'll make sure that those are eliminated, recreated in-house for sure. Hundreds of artists have worked on this project for years, internally and externally, and we share many influences, including modernism, Swiss typography, 2000s style vector art, cyberpunk, and of course the original Marathon trilogy. Our style is a result of all of those inspirations. And it's also worth noting that none of our external partners who've worked on branding or any part of the visual design of our game were involved with this situation. And lastly, personally, I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for artists working independently and producing, and making a living doing commercial or fine art. And we've worked with many of them. It's one of my favorite parts of the job is to make those connections and create content and collaborate. And so to that extent, I want to send my personal apology to Anti-Real, whose work was used in this case. And I know how unfair this feels, and we're doing everything we can to make this right with her. Her work is fantastic, and we clearly share mutual appreciation for a specific genre of graphic design, and it's very exciting, and I'm excited to have folded that into our style in general. So thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience.
So absolutely, and thank you, Joe, for coming in and chatting with us about that. Yeah, if you have any further questions about that, feel free to ask them as we go along. We're probably going to transition now and just talk a little bit about Alpha. And
here we go.
Alpha was a big milestone for us. There was a lot of stuff that went into it. It was always intended to be kind of like a smaller slice of the game. Wits, right? as we were going into it. Feel free to talk, by the way. It was always kind of meant to be a smaller slice of the game. It was always meant to be sort of like testing a little bit more of that like core combat and some of the baseline of the progression systems that we have, you know. And it was great, really great to hear a lot of the feedback, especially from those who played the game, as well as people who witnessed it, you know, and sort of get a sense of where everyone was attaching to certain things and where they didn't see as much meat as they wanted, or things that they didn't like, you know, like at all, or things that they did really like, you know. So there's a wide variety of opinions that sort of came about. A couple of things that we really learned, we really wanted to talk about though. One was the idea of sort of the core of the survival game, you know. I know we talked about this a lot, Wits, the survival game being this like sort of idea of not just running through the environment and trying to survive other people trying to shoot you or the enemies, but like all the different challenges of trying to get out. And we feel like some of the bigger things that we missed on that we know we wanted to see, but we kind of like didn't land super well, was like the idea of like resources and the survival economy. If you want to talk a little bit about that, Andrew.
Yeah, like we basically we were dropping like too much ammo, right? Too much heals, too much of everything, and so people were lasting the session for a really long time, and we just didn't really kind of push you out. And so we knew it was going to happen in the build, and so we've been really like focused on how we can improve that and you know, get more hazards in the game. There's a lot more hazards in the current build. There's a lot more evil things we have in the game, as also like, yeah, and half the guns are in the build, and so the other half are not in the build. So you haven't even seen half of the weapons. I know that there was some folks that thinking that like that was the full library. It is not. It's like half the guns in the game. And they were dropping too often too. Like we were dropping too many guns, too many long shots. I know long shots were a thing.
Long shots were OP, yeah.
We're focusing on that.
Yeah, there's the core of it is ultimately we wanted more stories where there was about like using your resources wisely, and we didn't feel like we put people, or like we didn't put players in a situation where they needed to use their resources wisely, and as a result there weren't enough stories where it was like, oh, I ran out of this thing and I had to figure it out, you know, or I really needed this thing and I was searching around trying to find it. And so we want to build more of those stories moving forward, and so we've been doing a lot of internal iterations. I know even our most recent build, we've stripped back a lot of those pieces, and we're seeing some kind of crazy stories come out of that. So yeah, so that's a big part of the survival economy. You talked a little bit about like survival challenges, like the idea of like, you know, the environment being a little bit more hazardous to you, you know. Or is there any stuff you want to share there, Andrew? Little bits?
Yeah, we're working on we're working on a bunch
He
of
looks
stuff.
so
working
nervous.
With Lars's team. Also, Lars is here.
Yeah, Lars, if you want to talk about it too.
Yeah,
feel free
so
to.
Lars,
He's
you
like,
should talk
"Talk,
about
please,
all the fun
guys.
things and all the
Say
ways
something.
that we're
How are you trying to kill
challenges.
players, Lars?
The guy on the right is in it right now. His mic's not turned on, so you can't hear what he's saying. This is a tough
toxic
stream.
plants now that we have in Martian perimeter. So like between sort of going between POIs, you will have to keep a lookout for that. It's for the people who got real used to switching to knife and just going full bore. You're not going to be able to do that any longer in the game. So we're thinking about all those kinds of things, things in the world that make sense. Like the world really does not want you there. You know, there's obviously the UESC.
Chat is just erupting right now, saying high quality production. The audio is cooked right now. They need to fix this. I don't understand why they didn't go live and do like an audio test for like 10 minutes or something. They just immediately jumped into it with nothing prepared, it seems like, other than their statement.
A lot of damage. They were like overly reacting, like in hit reacting, and so we're looking at reducing what's called like first sighted, which is like they look at you and they're like you, and then they get into combat with you, and then they take some shots. We want them to be more stand their ground robots and hit that killer mecha infantry fantasy that they kind of want to bring. So we're adding we're looking at transitions for going right to combat when they see you. We also noticed that when players were engaging in combat with the AI, they couldn't ever like disengage. They couldn't like kind of be like, okay, like I'm fighting, how do I break line of sight? And like they kind of
stealth options didn't work as strongly as you wanted to, right? In that way.
Yeah. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at we had there's a few bugs we had where you take out, like you have your knife and you take out like a recruit, and then like the entire POI, the entire like point of interest, like knows exactly where you are and they're running towards you. That's a bug we're working through right now with the team. And so the intent is that that makes noise obviously, and the nearest units like investigate that area versus the entire hornet's nest comes barreling towards your direction. And so
the guy on the right now is straight battling demons, dude. The look on his face has got me scared.
Working on their perception and how they kind of find you, right? We want to kind of have this engage options where, you can, do some damage maybe, and then like you don't need to finish the fight and stand and fight. Is that you actually might, they see you, and there's a moment in time where you can actually like break and kind of get a chance to get away. Yeah. But we still want them to be threatening versus like you can just run around them, right? They need to really push back.
The sweet spot you're kind of looking for is ultimately that you have more options for how you like divide and conquer and tackle them depending on how you play. But if they do get an advantage on you, each individual unit feels a little bit more threatening to you, right?
Yeah. Like, we were there's the shield unit, the big shield unit, for example, is if you get first shot advantage on this unit, especially like a precision headshot or something, sometimes they would like hit react, and then they wouldn't kind of do a bunch of their abilities that they kind of have that actually like charge you, and they like kind of tuck behind a shield, and you can't actually shoot them, and they're perfectly tucked behind that shield, and they push you and they want to like do this melee attack. We were noticing that they were getting taken out before they can kind of do that, and so we're looking at their vitality in ways where they don't feel like they're bullet sponges, but that we really require you to play this like marksman game, but also that they challenge you to kind of have different ways.
Why is Joe upset? He's not upset. They're trying to just talk about like the gameplay and the core mechanics that they're changing. Everything they're talking about is like very subtle and nuanced changes, which is really not what Marathon needs, at least in terms of the feedback. It's like they need like big sweeping changes, I would say. So a lot of this comes across to me a little bit like pandering, but
it's like this big hit react if you do a lot of precision damage. We're looking at maybe that if you duck behind a cover or something, that they don't know exactly where you are when they wake up, for example, and so that also plays into kind of more of the like solo viability in terms of like you don't have to like 1v9 all the robots.
No, that totally makes sense. I know another topic that sort of came up when it came to the survival game was also the pacing of like sort of every given session, right? Like I know we talked about it internally. It's like there tends to be like a front-loaded tension inside of our runs where a lot of tension happens at the beginning. There's a lot of brawling, and then it sort of like begins to quiet out as you're sort of playing through the rest of the session. And we wanted to make sure we shake that up a little bit. I know we've talked a little bit about how event pacing folds into that. Lars, I think you and your team have talked a little bit about it, right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that was really good. We actually got a lot of good data from the alpha about how event pacing was working, but also just sort of.
Someone commented saying Joe looks like these are his last minutes as an employed man. That's too far. I would like to see a heart rate monitor on him though. I would like to know, because he's looking nervous a little bit. All I'm saying is he just looks a little nervous. All right, the Bungie devs, sometimes they look this way in general. Clearly they're being put under immense scrutiny right now. And, when you're put under a microscope like that, it's tough to just go live and try to pretend like nothing really happened, or that you're just going to yap about the game for an hour and everyone's going to be okay with it.
Time you can guarantee that the PvP population at least is dwindling a bit. And so our challenge that we're looking at right now is how do we increase the world danger over time? And we can handle that in a bunch of different ways, but we've got some pretty neat ideas there. Like is it about complexity or requirements for exfils? Is it about increasing PvE or world resistance? Is it about pacing of the activities? I think the answer is all of the above, and so like we're looking at all of those things right now, and I think we have a lot of good knobs and tuning capabilities there. So I'm pretty bullish on our ability to make that. The longer you stay in the session, the less safe you feel, but also the more you're like, maybe I should get out of here now. So that we want to increase those sort of thoughts from happening too.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense.
Joe, you mentioned immersion too.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that definitely touches art. And one of the things we're hoping to show today, or show next week, is some of our fidelity improvements. I know that there were a few.
Okay, this is interesting.
Very work in progress areas.
Yes.
That got a lot of scrutiny in the alpha build, such as like exterior lighting and a perimeter map, and some of our lobby. So art is full steam ahead on a bunch of those improvements. We're very excited to show. And then the other side of immersion is kind of the runner stories that we want to tell, and the kind of fictional fantasy. And to that extent, we're working closely with creative direction and the whole team to sort of really dial in some of that fantasy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the work that you guys are working on, which has been really cool to see. I mean, everything from we had a bunch of stuff we wanted to show today, but by the way, we decided not to show it because we're still scrubbing all of our assets to make sure that we are being respectful of the situation that Joe talked about earlier. But there's a lot of things we're doing to try to increase that immersion. I know we've even added like really like details that have sort of helped to make it a little bit more immersive, like the blood that, you know, runners bleed even in water and things of that sort as trails and indicators of damage that they've taken. I've also seen us like sort of putting more entropy into the world, where we see a little bit,
yeah.
where the idea of the abandoned colony comes a little bit more to life on
For
places
sure,
like Mars.
yeah. Yeah, some of that stuff planned, some of that stuff definitely sort of heightened by the reaction to the cinematic trailer, which I think, you know, I love. It seemed to go over really well, and sort of making sure that we're sort of following that fantasy, tuning those knobs to whatever extent we can, and just, you know, material response, occlusion, lighting, fidelity. That does so much in terms of immersion. Yeah. From a technical sort of base experience point of view.
Even some of the foliage iterations.
Some of that shimmer.
Yeah.
Lots of exciting stuff happening under the hood. Team is doing amazing work. Hopefully we can show it soon next time.
Yeah.
And also the sort of whole lobby infill experience. You know, we're all excited about delivering that whole sort of comprehensive fictional fantasy of being a badass cyber mercenary, heading down to do dangerous work.
Yeah, a lot of the UI that we went in with was definitely in a temporary state too, and so for us, sort of finding a good way to make that a cohesive experience has been a lot of the effort.
Yeah, talking about all this like aesthetic stuff is like, I don't know, man. You just get on to the points that people were actually interested in, like get us some actual alpha codes next time. Like you gave such a limited number of people these alpha codes. No one got to play the fucking game. That'd made people salty. At least address it and be like, hey, yeah, next time we're actually going to make it an open alpha, or I don't even know. Like just get on with the actual points that people are interested in talking about. You know?
How do I describe it? It's like you're not like necessarily a good guy. You're not necessarily a bad guy. You're kind of going against the status quo in some degree, right? And so feeling that out a little bit more in terms of the experience, right?
Yeah. The runner fantasy has always been a blue collar fantasy.
Yeah.
For the most part, like you're doing a job. This is dirty work, and you're, taking contracts from sort of nefarious or questionable sources. But so communicating that visual fantasy is very exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's so we've been putting a lot of work into, especially sort of doing some iterations on the visual updates, and also, thinking about how we reinforce that fantasy as we're going forward. Another area we've been talking a lot about is crew play, and sort of thinking about the variety of different ways that players play the game. We definitely had people playing. A lot of people playing in solo matchmaking. We had a decent amount of people who played in solo unmatched made, just basically running around in the world in solo. We had a chunk of people who played in trios, across the different board. And we definitely found that through the feedback and also through a lot of the experiences that were relayed to us inside of the alpha, that the crew matchmade experience just wasn't that great, And so we're looking at a lot of ways to potentially solve that on our side. Some of it is thinking about how each individual can contribute. I know we've been talking a little bit, Andrew, about like the 1vx situation, if you want to talk a little bit about that. It's like how viable you feel like you can turn around a battle and stuff like that.
Yeah, we did some updates in the Alpha Nose Live because we really wanted to move the conversation forward because we feel like we got enough feedback on certain things, and we wanted to actually like take some swings at some problems that we're seeing, and we actually we implemented the shield change we did was actually something that we were getting to for our next milestone. That was in our next our current milestone, I guess, because it's an older build, right?
Yeah.
But like it was in our current milestone. We ported it over ASAP, and so yeah, really appreciate runner team and everybody kind of getting that change in, because it was a bit of a content change, but we felt it was worth it to actually learn more about time to kill and being able to, the power of shields in the combat economy and reducing the overhead of.
I know it may be a little bit petty, but it's just maybe funny to me. I'm pretty sure that there's a marathon graphic behind it right now. I'm pretty sure we could verify it just in case I'm making shit up. I'm pretty sure the little symbol with the 28 was one of the lifted images. I remember the 28 specifically being one of the lifted images, a part of from the artist. So I'm dying a little bit that maybe there's a possibility that literally when they went live to talk about it, they forgot that image being there. There's a chance. We'll verify that just to be sure.
Attachments to kind of get to its like big power delta, and so it requires all that investment to kind of get to a good spot. We were kind of nervous about like just upping the damage onto it wholesale, and so what we're doing is doing a it's called like a skill floor, skill ceiling audit, which is.
Someone typed in chat, Bungo Kel of Art. Stop. Stop.
And then what is it like, what is the skill demand at the floor, at the base, effectiveness? What are we asking for players? Like how much aim skill do you need? And then like where are the major flaws in the gun so that like when you're putting attachments in, you're build crafting, but also like removing as many flaws as you want in terms of like what you have a hard time controlling about the weapon. So we're doing that so that, when you feel like you're being taken out, it's like, oh, this person was good. And so when you're lower shields versus higher shields, we want to make sure that your guns are doing damage in the ranges that they're really supposed to. So if you get the drop on somebody, you should be effective, and it shouldn't be like you need certain rarity guns or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we're working on that a lot. We have, it's a bit spicy right now, like there's some SMGs that are a bit hot, in the current build, but like we feel like they're appropriately hot when they're, you're in CQC fights, and so fights resolve in close quarters with a close quarters weapon, the way you expect. LMGs are, kicking way harder, a lot more demand there in terms of the recoil.
Yeah.
Which is great. We hit some of the snipers. We're actually kind of reevaluating snipers a bit. Not like
this chat is completely unhinged, dude. This chat is what the Marathon Discord has been like for like 12 plus hours. It's like people just spamming Concord 2, people saying plagiarism will make me God. This chat is relentless right now, and I believe they have it on 1 month only follower mode. So if they didn't have it on 1 month only follower mode, could you imagine how toxic this would be? Like, could you imagine how like lit up this chat would be moving 1,000,000 miles per hour right now? They have limited it to just people that have been following for over a month. So it's a very small pool of people that can even comment on it, I believe.
Not guaranteed, but there's a way to win there.
There's a way to win, and that leads to the skill part. Like time to kill is always about skill. It's about effectiveness, right? And then like it's also about like window of opportunity as well. And it's kind of like how you triangulate like overall time to kill recipe. And so we're focusing on skill fidelity. We're focusing on every single aspect of that triangle. And so we're looking at, we have this like how many purple shield kills per clip, which is kind of like a spicy thought. But we're really iterating fast on that in the weapon side.
Cool. That totally makes sense. I know another part of like sort of the crew experience is also like the idea of like, do I have the tools to communicate with my crew, right? Like I know we had a bunch of challenges with even voice chat for players inside of the game, and we're definitely looking into that in terms of thinking about how do we make it easier for you to even enable voice chat, or like how do we make that part of your flow so that you can do that. I know we've talked a little bit about ping system, how do we add texture to the ping system to make it easier for you to coordinate with your team if you're not on voice chat. And do you have any thoughts on that one? I know you and your team have touched the ping system, but
yeah, ping was in a very baseline state for alpha. Like I would say it was a very like it was a very MVP even for alpha state. And we weren't super weren't super happy with what kind of where the deficiencies of where it was at, and so we are spending a lot of this milestone really plussing up ping, and we're also looking at things called a communications wheel, which is like how can you effectively communicate to teammates, how can you basically ping things in a container, how do you ask for ammo, stuff like that. So yeah, we're investing a lot on making that really feel intuitive and plussing up the crew play, and then we're also talking about some contract stuff too, Lars, as well about the fabric of contracts between multiple players. I don't know if you can talk a bit about what your team's cooking there.
Yeah, Lars, tell us about contracts.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of work. It was great seeing people's response to, I think, working along AI, the sort of different factions, and so obviously.
There's no moderation happening in the chat at all, which I think is probably the right play because people get really annoyed when there's censorship. When people want to unleash their frustration, censoring them is usually a bad idea, right? They'll take it out on you elsewhere. So they're literally just letting the chat just go absolutely insane. The entire chat is just spamming plagiarism will make me God endlessly right now. And I think this is probably the right thing for Bungie to do, though, is to let people actually express their frustration. So I don't mind that they're allowing that because I think it's the right approach, at least, and it might in the long run earn them kind of a sympathy vote to some degree, because these guys are sitting here and they're just getting badgered by the chat. If they even have it in front of them and are reading it at all, they're like, well, this is going terrible. This is not going the way we had planned. Of course it wasn't going to be this good originally, even without the drama. It wasn't going to be the best reception, but it's going much worse than they had expected, I think.
But weren't, I'll say from my perspective, and this isn't the team's perspective, this is mine. I think some of those things could have been more challenging, and so looking at that as well.
Yeah, it feels bad if it was genuinely an accident on their end. I think that it being a genuine accident is not 100% far-fetched. It's just there's a large part of the art team of Marathon that follows that artist that had been developing that style, and they their whole portfolio looks exactly like what Marathon looks like. And I get that that's kind of just an art style to some degree, but then you also have the lifted assets on top of that. So it's not particularly one bad apple. You can say oh, there's a former employee that doesn't work here anymore, that they did it and they're gone, so we don't have to worry about them anymore, and it was all their fault and no one else's fault, because you still have the current art team that does follow this individual that got stolen from. So it's very, I think that Bungie's response to it is not being received well, and that's why they're seeing so much more backlash, because they're not really addressing the elephant in the room, which is that the current art team follows them. The current art team, it has been following them for years, and the timeline by which Marathon was developed is premature comparative to that person developing their art. So it looks really bad. It looks like the art team literally saw this artist and others and basically lifted and used their assets and didn't give any attribution, no payment, not even a moment of contact with them. Didn't say anything hey, we really like your stuff, we want to use it as inspiration for our game, or anything. Nothing, no contact, but used it, and now it's being monetized for their game. It's just a really bad approach, you know what I'm saying?
Instead of scrubbing so many assets, would it not make more sense to employ the artist, who obviously has nailed the aesthetic?
Oh shit!
So
what just happened?
The question was, instead of scrubbing all the assets, wouldn't it be easier to employ the artist who made all the assets?
Yeah, I mean, and for what it's worth, we're confident the majority of the assets in that capacity are
got the Q&A.
Original, created internally by our internal
I got
artists.
to ask them this crazy questions.
We would love to work with Anti-Real if that's an opportunity that presents itself. I mean, that's part of what we sort of reached out to communicate. It's at this point, it's a very small sort of set of assets. The decals themselves are the kind of they're details that are sort of placed on the sides of buildings or crates or something like that. So we absolutely do need to replace them, and we would rule in sort of any sort of way of doing that, including contracting, collaborating, or working with the artist, for sure.
Yeah, and additionally, I think
it's a great question.
Oh, just to sort of add on to that. Additionally, when we run into situations like this, we also feel like something slipped through our net, and so we have to go back and look at everything just to make sure that nothing else slipped through our net, if that makes sense, because it caught us by surprise, and we want to just make sure that we're doing the right diligence to ensure it doesn't happen again. So either way, we're going to scrub all the assets just because we want to make sure that we didn't miss something else. But yeah.
They're at least they're asking.
Yeah, but that's a good question.
We're getting a lot of
tough questions.
We're getting a lot of general questions in the chat, Cross, about like the overall aesthetic. Do you want to like speak to that and like kind of like where you're getting like the influence, where you're like making the art? You have to relay this question again, Joe.
So there's a lot of questions just about where your inspiration for a lot of this art style,
audio
and
stuff,
sort of like where that comes from.
Yeah.
And how you think of the art style.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from a lot of sources, a lot of genres. I talked about it a little bit online. Probably a couple years ago. Graphic design is obviously a massive part of our game, and typography in general. That's one of the things I sort of am the most proud of in a lot of ways, is sort of the idea of elevating typography and graphic design to sort of the forefront in a game or in an industry that typically doesn't, I think is sort of safe to say. So in terms of that, the influences range from there's even some DNA shared, I think, with Destiny, with sort of Swiss modernism and that whole that whole genre of sans serif typography, all the way up through 2000s, early 90s, which is where I mentioned before. I think there is a lot of overlap there in terms of inspiration with anti-real. The designers are public, vector art, that kind of thing. Just an example of sort of an exciting part of graphic design history that feels connected to, sort of naturally connected to games. The studio that sort of drove a lot of that worked very famously on a game called Wipeout, in a very early PlayStation game, which is a big influence for us. And then all the way up to sort of current trends, which may or may not be definable genres. There's sort of a deconstructed kind of minimalism. Anti-design is another genre that I've heard it referred to. And this is just specifically thinking about typography and sort of the sort of superficial layer of our branding, and sort of world building. There are a whole slew of influences when it comes to architecture and character design and world building and natural palette. So it's all a big soup.
Awesome. Let's see. Wrapping up the previous subject, which is like sort of on career play. I know that we've also been exploring internally, doing a lot more tests with mixed crew sizes. We're still thinking about how we want to approach the idea of not just 1vx, but like, are there different crew sizes that we want to support? Like, do we want to do something that's more about solo duo, or things of that sort? We haven't really landed on a discussion point yet. Those are all investigations that we're sort of pursuing. So nothing we can commit to there, but we're definitely looking into stuff like that. We're also looking into ways that, you can communicate in some way with teams that are not
proximity
your team.
chat.
We don't know exactly what feature that could be, but we've been talking a lot about that. So we're looking into a lot of stuff on that front to sort of improve the overall like sort of social complexity of the game, but also make it better for matchmade crews and also crews of different sizes, whether they be ones, solos, duos, or trios, to find a good experience. So let's see, what is another area that we've been touching on? There's so many things. Oh, progression. Yes. Progression rates in the alpha were way too fast. Everybody went really far, in the alpha in a very short period of time. Some of it was a lot of stuff was being gotten out. Some of it was just our tuning on factions was way too fast.
This whole stream is cooked. They're literally like weaving in and out of the controversy to like actual like marathon feedback, which is just super watered down, like, yeah, we're gonna tune, progression systems a little bit, it's just this. They should have done an entire stream just addressing the art controversy alone. Like, that should have been a whole thing in and of itself. And then the next day do a stream talking about their feedback from the alpha and mostly the very intense criticism. And then after that, if you want to do a third stream where you talk about all this fluff and progression system, sure, fine, like some of those smaller things, but don't pander. Like, go to the things that people are actually interested in talking about, because this chat is not no one in this chat, not one single person in this chat said, hey, what about the progression systems in no one said that. No one asked that. No one cared. So focus on the topics at hand, go through them all, be thorough. I was respecting the questions there because they're actually asking the tough questions and answering them at least as best as they could. I was actually respecting that for a minute there. This going back to progression systems, I don't know about this. It's not necessary at all.
Yet that we are looking to help sort of like make that journey a little bit more awesome, especially as you go further into it. Things like our archive system, which is a little bit more about achievements and collection stuff that we have, as well as there's additional other things inside of there, like factions that you haven't met yet. But yeah, and we're also trying to take all of our factions and give them a slightly more distinct identity against each other. Right now, they read definitely differently from like a lore standpoint, but like how that folds into some of the upgrade systems and some of the contracts they ask you to do is not as distinct. So we're refining that as we go along too. So, yeah, those are a lot of the big beats of what we are tackling. What else was there in that list? I don't remember. Andrew, maybe you do.
I was gonna say it's a good amount.
It's a good amount. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
It's a good amount. Like, yeah, I think the overarching deal is like we definitely have gotten like a lot of points to improve on, and we're actively improving on them right now. And like some of our investigations for bigger ones, but I think like in general, the survival game being more robust is a huge one. Feeling more immersed in the world, having the world feel more alive.
Yeah,
you hitting on the fantasy of like being a runner, right? Like in what we call infill, which is like going from matchmaking into boots on the ground, doesn't feel like super great right now. So we're actively working on that. Like, I think there's all the gaps that we heard either from feedback or that, were data that we looked at in the game of like how players resolve things. I think we have a bunch of big improvement points, and we're swinging pretty hard at all of them right now.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've spent a lot of time sort of beginning a lot of the work has already begun, but like sort of also just, talking about all the sort of work we are going to do about tackling a lot of these issues as well.
So that's a good segue into a question from IonTK, who's asked, what's the biggest negative feedback from the alpha that the team is looking to change by release, or at least close to the period after release?
I mean, they're all pretty big points, I'd say. I think the survival stuff, like the run texture and the survival stuff, is probably one of the biggest ones, because we're putting a lot of different points into it. Like, we're thinking about
that's the biggest one.
Lars mentioned earlier about how exfilling is different, inside of the game. Like, for example, we might change some of the rules around exfilling and sort of the way it works right now.
This game's
We're also
cooked.
Thinking about everything from AI combatants to
that's the biggest
resources
change
to loot.
From the alpha.
All is part of that, So it's a pretty big amount of stuff that we're doing in that space. The other big area I'd say is actually the creative fantasy stuff, which we're really, really trying to land a little bit better, like the immersive fantasy stuff. Wish we could show you some examples, and we definitely will soon, but
proximity chat, solos, stamina / heat.
Really
the game's called Marathon. You're a runner and you can't run from one side of the map to the other.
That it mirrors the intensity of like the experience that
just
we
say those three things
on the planet.
And people will go W.
Like, really,
in the chat.
Marathon is supposed to be about surviving Tau Ceti and the Marathon, ship, and surviving that situation. Right now, it just feels like it's purely about surviving other players, and we want to really make sure that all comes together, both from a creative and gameplay standpoint, in a really impactful way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one on combat is just we need to make the game, like, we need to have a lot more options for players to kind of like resolve different scenarios differently, which is a hilarious statement, but like, it's like you need to be able to, again, go to the point earlier, like you have to be able to peel off of AI, understand how to fight different AI, different players, how you get out. get more variety in there. And then we did have a lot of good feedback around it requires 2 people to do anything in the game, or 2 or more, and also like how much you're reviving, and like at the time it takes that for them other enemy team to or enemy squad to revive, and how long.
Yeah,
it
we
takes
didn't even
you.
mention that we're revisiting some of the resing stuff, but yeah.
The res stuff. We're changing how that works, so that when you actually do get a pick on an enemy crew, they can't res in the time that it takes you to heal to full, which I think was a kind of a big problem. So we wanted to make sure that you by yourself have more agency and can actually affect more change in the world, but also the world really pushes back a lot more on you. So I think that's probably the biggest trend of feedback on combat that we're actively tackling from a ton of different angles, like on combatants and on the runner side and on the weapon side.
Yep, and
So I got a question from No, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was saying from the art side, it's focusing on immersion and sort of divided into fidelity, sort of the technical side of our visual world, and then it's the sort of narrative. It's supporting the narrative of the runner fantasy, which there's a lot of work to do, and those are the 2 biggest takeaways for us from the art side.
There's another question, Cosmo, you said?
Yeah, so I got a question from Curiosity. It says, going forward, will we see more ways to customize and visualize, represent ourselves as players within the runner? This being one of my main questions for both gameplay and immersion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we are going to be doing a little bit more. Like, I know Andrew's team has been working on skin work for a while, in terms of just thinking about how to, like, give you visual options to express yourself. We're not going to talk super deep about it because we're still in the process of figuring a lot of those pieces out. But is there anything you want to share on that front, Andrew?
Yeah, we were looking at different ways for their the runners to be customized, both gameplay wise and also in terms of their visual sets. We're also looking at making weapon stuff too, to express your weapons and stuff different ways.
You know exactly what they're cooking up. So instead of giving you complete character customization, they'll do the Destiny 2 route, where in order to change the way your character looks, you have to go buy it in the Eververse store, or whatever Marathon's Eververse store is, right? Marathon's microtransaction store, where you can go buy yourself a new skin for your runner. That's the game plan. That's why they're keeping it under wraps so much, because they know that would give a lot of backlash right now. That, oh yeah, you can just go buy a new skin for Marathon in the microtransaction store for $10 probably.
We're looking at how we can get plus up implants a bit more, so they stand up better alongside the cores. And then on weapons, we had perks only in like the upper tiers of attachments, like on purple attachments and stuff like that. So you'd have like a purple magazine that had a perk on it, or a purple barrel that had a perk. We're taking a lot of the perks and putting them into the chip attachment, and so they're not divided by the weapon or the weapon family anymore. Like the chips are generic, and so if you find a chip, you can put on any gun.
So it gives you more like an anchoring element then, like this like verb that you can throw on a thing, and then
and there's more chips at like lower rarities too. So we're really looking at how we can get more of that build crafting into the weapons versus like you need a specific thing, and there being more considerations for what verb you want to add to the gun overall.
Yeah.
So that's a big push that we're doing right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
So I got a
from an
question
art
from
side,
Ethan.
I'm super excited about the whole cosmetic side, the fashion game that we're gonna deliver. Our base characters have such a unique look and sort of specific to our visual world that it's a question we've gotten a lot about. What kind of range, what kind of aesthetic or visual range do these runners support? And their answer is all of them. So, yeah, we're very excited to start rolling out looks and sort of ways for players to identify more specifically with certain runners or styles or fashions.
Cool. Cosmo?
So I got a question from Ethan. Has the team reconsidered its stance on proximity chat or exploring other ways to encourage more emergent social interactions between rival players and squads?
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that we're still brainstorming around. Is like, how do you use Signal to other people? Like, the classic friendly. Like what's our version of that? Or is there a way that you can use those things in interesting ways between groups right now? We don't have a solution to it just yet, but we are talking through it right now. Yeah.
Don't brainstorm. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Proximity chat already exists. Just put it in the game. That's a terrible answer. That's probably one of the most political, worst answers I've heard. It means they don't want to do it, even though that's what people want for this game.
And it's insanely overwhelming.
The materials for each faction. Oh, you mean for the upgrades, like to purchase the upgrades and stuff like that?
Right.
I think right now we're talking about the materials economy a little bit, how it all aligns to different things. There's a couple things that I think we've learned from Alpha. One is that we want more materials that are kind of like a little bit more memorable and evocative, like we said. We think we like things like tick milk inside of there because it just kind of has this like interesting, evocative, like kind of like, but you kind of question what it's about. So the creative theming of some of the materials we're taking a second pass at, but the other part of it is there is a lot of materials and they're all like sort of value graded, like in terms of thinking about, like greens, blues, and purples and stuff like that. I try to make it a little bit easier for you to understand the value of a material, as it sort of is used across different things between like sort of recipes for trading versus upgrades and things of that sort. It's like a sort of a top down, how do we use materials kind of thing that we're looking into. We do think that it's less about how many materials as opposed to it being clear how they're used, and I think because part of it is that we do want there to be a big diversity of different types of things that you want to loot, but it's about you associating it with the value that you're going to be getting from it. That's super important, and I think that we're still a little loose on that, and we're trying to tighten that up more.
Yeah, we did a big pass on relatability and stuff like that. Which is, we actually had a pass in, not for this build that everyone played, but the current build that we're in. And there's a bit more, I would say, theming, like in terms of what goes where and like what things that would go with weapon upgrades, and you'd be like, okay, like I kind of understand that. And so there's a lot of theming discussions, a lot of relatability discussions. We're still iterating on the look sets of them as well, how they sit in the environment. We're still looking at the looting moment as well. So when you open a container, that it feels really good. Right now, it kind of feels like this like pop in. I know that like some folks feel like that it kind of like the pop in feels like, or the pop in of the loot when you're going through a container. The searching essentially is what it is.
Yeah.
Is it feels a little bit like, your internet is slow or something. And so we're really trying to make it feel like it's like you're actually searching through, and that feeling really rewarding when you find something in there, whether it's a material or a valuable or something else. So yeah, I think that we're looking at the organization of the materials, what they are, what they're used for, and then, understanding when you find a specific one, you're like, oh yes. The other thing, it's probably, I mean, we haven't had a question about it yet, but I feel like we should talk about it, is bag space and all that kind of good stuff, right, Joe?
Like in terms of like thinking about, we've definitely gone back and forth on a lot of things, including around backspace, which is like we want you to feel the tension of obviously what you pick up and how much of it you pick up, right? But we also want you to like think more about what, like right now, for example, I would say our looting is very much based on sort of stack value in a size, where it's like, oh, we have a lot of things that accomplish. It's like how much value do you get stacking something inside of a specific slot as opposed to getting a variety of different types of values out of things, It's something we've been talking a lot about. And yeah, we might be changing some icon sizes or things like that in the future, or like basically some of the sizing of different types of things inside of your bag just to make it the puzzle a little bit better. But there's a lot of iterations we're going to do on that front. We are going to make it probably a little bit rarer for you to find bags, but we're going to try to make it easier for you to like reliably get them from the black market and things of that sort. So we're shifting some of those equations around.
Yeah, base bag space is always the topic of conversation.
Base bag
space is always the big discussion.
I think we're still talking about base bag space. Like basically the thing is we don't want you to not feel like you want to get a bag. Right? Like I think it's like it's weird if you always feel like you have enough space and you don't need a bag. But I do think that we're still one, like we still want to make sure that tension feels right, you know. But yeah.
So I got a question from Zionless. It says, is there plans to add guaranteed ways to build craft? I heard lots about build crafting, but not being able to get a loadout I designed without hopefully randomly stumbling upon it sounds bad. I would like to see crafting system, or at least have the option to change cores with some material expenses.
I think we're trying to make the lower level of build, like the baselining of build crafting, something that you can establish through your black market a little bit easier, you know, like acquire and build in that way. But there's always going to be like a difference when it comes to high rarity things. High rarity things, like for example, there will be builds that involved having a really rare item that may not be something you can always have. But like we want you to get more involved at the lower level of build crafting where you feel like you can actually kind of do that kind of thing. But yeah, Andrew, I know you.
I think we agree with the statement that was in the question, which is like it feels hard to maintain like a build, and we need to. We're looking through a bunch of ways, through black market or like through bartering or something like that to kind of like be able to get the right verbs. Maybe it's not the same thing that you want because we still want you to kind of go and loot things, but we want to have you have verbs that you're like, I like when I'm playing glitch, and like this is like the overall verb set I would like for the glitch, and you having more opportunity to be able to go back to that well versus like, oh, though my access to the well is purely based off of the randomness of the container.
I think that's it. I think it's like, if you think of like if the like lower level version of it, the middle version of it, and the perfect version of it, right? We want you to have access to like the lower or middle version, depending on how you've like, you know, done that. But the perfect version of it, I think some pieces will still be, you know, things that if you lose them, you'll have to find them again, you know, right? Yeah.
So Drifter wants to know, is there any discussion on reworking the resurrection of dead teammates system? Would like to see this addressed before launch, as rezzing dead bodies seems free is bad for the tempo of the game.
We concur. Yep, I'll just jump in and say yes, we concur. Yes, we concur. Whereas about a bunch of work is going into it right now. We basically have our one axis of a solve we have for right now is increasing the resurrection time and also having it so that every time you go down, the timer does get increased. And so if you keep on going down, like you kind of like your ability to come back into, back from the abyss is harder and harder.
So the Destiny 2 system.
We also did a bunch of changes in the alpha around like the timer, saved progress timer. So when alpha first came out, it saved your progress the entire time, and so you could like get to halfway, take a fight, and then go back and kind of just pay for the half of the res timer. We did have a regressive decay on that, so it goes down. And we're looking at other things too. That if that's not enough, we definitely know that. Rezzing feels a bit too free. We're also taking a look at the messaging. I know that there's the little stick figure above the bags and stuff that we adorably call the little gentleman above the bags. We're looking at that actually being a tell, so you can't just like camp the bags the entire time. We liked that.
Someone is saying in the chat that they should ask them what they think of arc raiders. That's a diabolical question.
Coalesce around the information, but I think we're seeing that once you give too much information, obviously like it just like you can have too much action in terms of what to do and where, like you can stay in the area knowing that there might be like a clutch play happening or something. So I would say we agree with the baseline is that rezzing is too free. And we're not looking for just purely punishments where if you do get fully dead, like you feel like coming back and being alive is like not worth the time. That's definitely something we don't want to do. And so we're trying to make it so that there is a thing for continuously dying, and then rezzing does feel really clutch when you do it, but it's not a guaranteed thing.
I know we've talked about it, but I think the sort of place we're trying to land ultimately is that if a person gets downed, rezzing them, like not downed, but like not completely eliminated, but like downed, right? Like knocked down, rezzing them in combat is hard, but it's doable. And if they get eliminated, getting them out, like rezzing them in combat is really, really, really like very almost difficult to do, right? You really want to do it once you've cleared the area. Is that the intent?
Yeah, we want it to be that like doing it in a fight is not as you don't want to take that on as often as you did in the alpha. Like I think that's something we're seeing is that like you saw folks in the middle of a fight, go in the back and like res
just res
somebody,
the
and then
person,
like now it's like the numbers game of it's like okay, it's 2v3, okay, now it's 3v3, okay, now it's 2v2, now it's 1v2, okay, now it's
Yeah.
3v2, and so yeah, we're definitely working on that, and so not that we definitely don't want it to like remove it from the game entirely, because we do think that it gives a bit more of that social texture to the crew play, or even like if you're playing, you know, whether a duo or a trio or something, but we definitely don't want to make it like the obvious choice where we want death to matter, and I think that there's a feeling, I think we got in feedback where death does not feel like it matters.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of questions in chat about like, where are the aliens? And there's another question. It's like, where is the 4? Are they coming? You want to speak to any of it?
I mean, we have plans for like a lot of alien stuff coming in the future, you know, that we
Concepts
don't
of
really
plans.
want to talk about. There is some other stuff that has to do with like the 4. We have a touch of it already that we have in testing, you know, but I can't, but I don't know if we're ready to talk about all those plans yet. I mean, like it's content, but it's not kind of we're ready to show yet, if that makes sense. But
Yeah, part of like part of the baseline of Marathon right now is the table stakes of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And then we're trying to build, but not like build in like a forever way, but like build aggressively towards the alien friction that I think everyone's kind of like leaning at and kind of like, you know, and heading towards, and like in their wants. But we're trying to get there in a way where we get the table stakes, and then, you know, we go from there. Even some of our weapons, I know that there was some folks that were just like, where's the 4 rifle, right? Where's the giant pink 4 rifle from the first Marathon game? And we're setting the baseline, but that doesn't mean that we're not invested there or anything.
Yeah.
It just means that this is the baseline of where we're going to get to. We're definitely conscious of starting from a place that we can grow and get crazier from here. And if you start at full volume, you know, there's kind of no place to go. You're going to get to the ceiling and you crush up against the ceiling pretty fast. But that doesn't mean we're not invested in those areas. I think we're pretty heavily invested.
Yeah, I mean,
and
like
talking
ultimately,
about it.
we're at the start of a journey that we hope Marathon is taking towards, you know, telling a much bigger story, you know. But you want to start at a place that makes sense.
Yeah, there was a really great conversation yesterday about something in this vein, and the excitement was very high in the room about it. So
Yeah.
if you like aliens and mystery, I think we're actively having good conversations about that.
The silence.
I feel like we talk a lot on here. We have conversations about. There's things we're building. I guess
Yeah, there are things we're building. There's things we talk about with the goal of building, and then things we talk about knowing we will be building them even further in the future, and all those things are true. Yeah.
It's just a lot of like things are. It'll be crazy. Just wait. It'll
like,
be
what do we
crazy.
do
Just
to
wait.
All right, got time for one more question. Are there any plans to expand the verticality of the early game maps by increasing their depth and complexity? For example, by adding more underground locations that could be unlocked through collective community progress or completing some kind of raid-like mechanics?
We've talked about how we use we're probably going to be shifting around how we use some of the existing spaces, to be fair, like in terms of thinking about how we're going to add more complexity in ways that we approach those maps, right, Lars? Like in terms of thinking about it, but like I know we've talked about how as like a live game, we want to continuously sort of like add to these maps and think about them in the future. But yeah, Lars, I know you guys have talked about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, where you were just talking about the alien stuff and how we start at the baseline. I think the maps, we think about it in the same way. And obviously, there were some nooks and crannies in the maps that were in the alpha, and it obviously wasn't all of the content we plan to have when the game comes out. And so, but yeah, we see it as, again, creating like this really satisfying baseline, and then looking for room to grow and how we increase that complexity over time. And I would say some of the maps, the newer maps that we're working on right now, take that into account even more so than Perimeter and Marsh. Even though we had a lot of those conversations early on about Perimeter and Marsh as well, and then which saw things like the underground sort of gold locked room that was underneath AI Blank, or the sort of twisty and turny tunnels that are underneath bio research. And so again, I think it's like starting at the baseline and then figuring out the right things to add and thinking about that approach from first principles going forward too.
All right, Joe, do you want to close us out with anything?
Yeah, once again, I want to appreciate everybody for like sort of not just joining us here, but also whoever participated in the alpha or whoever was part of watching it or just even part of the discourse. We really appreciate it. We're really like excited that a lot of people are interested in sort of seeing where we evolve this game and sort of how we're continuing to iterate on it and make it better. So thank you all for the feedback. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for the sort of support and for sharing your feedback and opinions with us. It's all super valuable, and we've been listening. We're like constantly talking about how to tackle it. We're doing a lot of things already to tackle it. We're sorry we couldn't show anything this week. Unexpected conditions came up, but next time we want to be showing you a little bit more about what we're working on, and hopefully that'll be exciting to see. But yeah, thank you all very much. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. That's the final freeze frame there. A picture says 1,000 words right there. Oh man. So that was something. I'm gonna say my initial impressions of that stream was bad. All bad. Mostly bad. 9 out of 10 bad for the most part. It felt very unplanned, unorganized. I mean, the audio issues, I mean, we could get onto those little nitpicky things, but would expect a multi-billion-dollar corporation to at least have a setup where they could talk to the people with some decent mic quality. Like, they got the guy on like Discord with like his phone mic. He's the community manager, he's talking on his phone. It's got like, it's a mess. You know what I'm saying? It's a mess. All right, that's all I'm saying. The mismanagement is a mess. I'm not sure who. There needs someone like overseeing the whole project to just be like, hey, like, this is not it. Secondly, they didn't address all of the hot topics, but they did address some of them. And they gave a continuation of their previous response on Twitter. And to be fair, they're not going to talk about how they're following that particular artist and how it could very well be that they kind of, took inspiration from them without giving them any attribution or literally stole from them. So that's where the kind of the fork in the road is for a lot of people, where it's very easy to draw a logical conclusion that you didn't just take inspiration from this person, you stole from them, because you're admitting you stole from them. You're admitting that someone at your studio took their assets and put it in the game, but you're limiting it to just the very specific aspects. So it's kind of like you're admitting guilt on only the things you got caught on, right? This is a very key element to this, where you admit guilt for only the things you got caught on until further revelations are found, right? Until we find out that the whole art team is following this individual. It reminds me actually very similarly of the Dr. Lupo situation to some degree, right? Upon getting exposed, he only wanted to admit the most minimal offense possible. Like, oh yeah, I was reading chat, and chat gave me these chess codes, right? Or the chess moves to do. And then it was, oh no, it was more than that. It was just one game though. It was just one game, and I used the engine. And then, okay, yeah, it was both games. And it keeps progressively getting worse, right? But for Bungie here, this is a different situation, but it's similar approach, right? Where you only need to admit guilt and fault in what the evidence has been presented. Like, the actual art that is one for one lifted, they have to admit that. There's no denying that, right? Those images, of course, stolen. But anything beyond that would be an admission of guilt that would be very damning for them, right? For them to say, yeah, we've been following this artist and we liked their style, and I mean, we just kind of took what they're doing and kind of just made that marathon, you know? Like, that's what people are believing of this situation. That's what people think of this situation. And Bungie's not going to address it. It's forever going to be a unspoken area of this game. But even if they don't want to, right? The community has already spoken how they feel about the situation. It's already overwhelmingly not in their favor. That they stole, obviously, those assets that were on the sides of those buildings and stuff, and all these various different decals and writings and scribblings and stuff. But it's more than that, though. That's the problem, is that it is clearly more than that, from the team following them and from just that person's entire portfolio. It's just more than that. The exact art scheme, the colors, like he's saying right here that it's a combination and a culmination, almost like an amalgamation of so many different art styles, right? And that's fine, because that would represent, if you took like all these different classical and modern art styles and this and that and this and combine these ingredients together, right, you would spit out something that would be very different in some way, right? But when you take all these different styles that you're claiming attribution towards and you spit out the exact portfolio of this artist that you follow, that's just, you're not fooling anyone at that point. Like, you're not, like, it's we're past that, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I feel like I'm talking to Big Kangas again here, who played with the cheater. It's like you're already caught in 4K. Like, we know no one's going to admit anything further than what they have to admit, right? And when you're in a legal situation, right, your lawyer is going to tell you, right? If they had a lawyer here, they'd be like, don't admit anything more than you have to, right? There's no point in throwing yourself under the bus and then and then reaching up and yelling at the bus, hey, put it in reverse, you know? Like, there's no, like, it's not a good approach, but it's the honest approach, right? And if you don't take that approach, people will see right through you. They're going to see right through you, and you're not going to win. You're not going to win the good sentiment of the community, and people are just not going to believe it. They're just not going to believe it. They're not going to believe it. All right? And that's where it's at. People are not going to believe it. People are going to say, from now until the end of time, that Marathon's assets and Marathon's art was stolen from this individual. The best thing they could do is hire that individual to work for them. And I mean the best thing they could do. They should not just hire them. They should pay them a healthy salary. They should give them equity in this game, ownership of this game. They should own a percentage of all gross sales of any if this game profits anything, they should get some. They should get the highest level of treatment for what has happened and how these narratives have combined. Whether it's accurate or not, it's just the narrative that the world has created. It's top. This is the most popular post. Her tweet, the artist's original tweet, is the most popular post ever made about Marathon. That is literally the peak narrative of this game right now, is that the art was stolen. The best case scenario for them is to try to throw as much money at that situation as possible and be like, please, we need you on our team. We are desperate. Like, they need that play more than anything. They should offer them a crazy contract, 6 figures, multiple years, equity in Marathon, everything. Because without that piece, this game does not make it past arrival. This game does not make it past launch. This game is DOA on launch, because no one is going to support what has happened. Okay, they're just not going to. You're not going to fool them. You're not going to, try to what is this, political speak, right? Try to work around it with all these different mental gymnastics is what I'm looking for. That's the word I'm looking for. You're not going to create this mental gymnastics to try and explain, oh, this art style, that art style, we took inspiration from this. You're not going to do it. It's not. People are just see right through it. So put that aside. End that. Focus on that. This was not a good representation right here. And obviously they're going to be hard at work right now, scrubbing the assets. Like, literally, instead of developing the game, what they need to do and doing these radical changes, including proximity chat, building a solos playlist, and doing all this stuff, now they are literally going through and scrubbing the assets and cleaning everything up and verifying everything and making sure that they're not using any more stolen assets or anything like that. Because when they show the alpha again the next time, you better believe that people are going to be searching through every little building, every little crack, every little crevice, looking under every little rock, looking for symbols and seeing if anything else lines up with what was previously stolen. So definitely a terrible situation for Bungie to be in. It it was already looking bad for Marathon. I mean, it was looking bleak. I mean, someone said in the comment chat that this stream has like 5,000 views, which, you know, 5,000 views on Twitch is pretty good for a streamer, but for an actual game, like for an actual franchise game that's meant to like launch, not very good. Like that's pretty small. There's a very little interest in Marathon, and the metrics across all social media in regards to Marathon represent a similar pattern of just apathy. There's just, people are just not interested in this game, and they don't want to play it. They don't care about your updates. They don't care about you talking about, oh, we're changing the progression systems. They don't care. They want to hear radical changes. They want to hear some of the systems that Arc Raiders has implemented, and the reason why Arc Raiders is being praised so much. They want to hear that. And then you get on there and you start pandering more, and you don't talk about the actual topics people want, or you don't give them the actual resolve they want. They talked about some of the topics. They actually did answer some of the hard questions, but they didn't actually say what they needed to say, which was like, yeah, we're doing some big overhauls. We're actually changing some stuff up. They're still going to try and meet their September deadline, even after having to scrub all these assets. And like we said, the game is already done. They said that they revealed 50% of the weapons in the alpha. So that's half of everything. So whatever weapons you saw, I only saw like, I mean, there's probably a decent amount, but like, you know, I saw a handful of different weapons. There's just double that. And 2 characters and I think 2 more maps, right? That's what Marathon is. And people are not impressed. So it's a bad situation for them. It's a bad situation for them. And this did not go over well at all. And their continuous like workarounds from this is also not going to sit well with the community. I don't know what they can do to recover from this. I know a lot of people, they want to see, you've supported Bungie for so long. You've enjoyed Halo. You've enjoyed Destiny. We don't want to see them crash and burn with this, right? But you can't help but feel like this is trending downwards so fast and so bad that I don't know what could happen. Maybe Sony will step in and do something drastic, but at this point in time, it's bad. And you know that the metrics behind the scene have to be bad as well, because they've asked people to wishlist it. This game is probably not getting wishlisted very much, right? They have to be sitting there scrambling a little bit, like scratching their heads like, this game's meant to come out in September. It's all negative. There's very little interest in this game, and we can't make any drastic changes between now and then. It's not good. It's not good. So they should have kept it quiet and just shadow dropped it. I mean, there's a lot of different approaches. I don't know if that's the right one, but a complete shadow drop of a game like this isn't necessarily going to help it either, right? Because people would still just stream it and be like, this game's not interesting, right? You have to compel players with interesting and engaging gameplay and adding on to the genre. Like, you can't just show up with like something comparable, or in this case less comparable than the current existing games, and expect to be charging money for it. You know, if you don't have a product that's as good as the existing products, then you need to undersell them, right? That's what you do. If you have a product, whatever you're trying to sell, in this case a video game, and if your product does not match up to the bar of the best product currently on the market, which is Tarkov, and everyone would agree that this game does not hold up to Tarkov standards, then you undersell them as much as you can, and based on the quality of the game. At this quality, this is a free-to-play game. This is a free-to-play game. You don't make this game free-to-play, no one's playing it. And even if you make it free-to-play, you might not have too many people playing it. It's not looking good for Marathon. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That's a wrap on this one.